The Voss Combined Command Academy had been training fleet officers for 210 years. It sat in high orbit over the dead world of Cayley's 9, a planet whose surface had been glassed so long ago that its ruin was no longer a wound, only a fact, the kind of fact new cadets stopped noticing by their second month. Its graduation rate was 58%. Of the cadets who entered, fewer than 6 in 10 left with a commission. The rest were reassigned, quietly, to logistics postings across the Reach, where their names would not be spoken again in the halls they had trained in. Alumni of the Academy held command positions across 14 active fleets. 3 of the last 5 Coalition fleet admirals had graduated from the same lecture hall, where the strategy seminar was held every third day, the one with the long table and the star charts embedded in its surface, dimmed now to standby amber. In 210 years, 9 humans had been accepted. 4 had graduated. The current class had 1. The Academy had been founded in the years following the Threshold War, when the Coalition's founding species had needed a way to standardize command doctrine across 100 worlds that had never before agreed on anything, including how to fight. Its charter still hung in the entry hall, translated into 41 languages, none of them human, because at the time of its founding no human world had yet been contacted. That fact was printed nowhere in the recruiting materials. It did not need to be. Every cadet who read the charter's founding date against Earth's contact date understood the arithmetic without being told. Ezra Callum was 23, from a registry address that did not exist anymore. His file listed his homeworld as Perimeter Colony Station 14, a settlement that had been under active siege for 11 of his 23 years, and had stopped transmitting a location beacon 9 years ago for reasons the file did not explain, and the admissions board had not pressed him on. Commodore Reyes Thal, who would later become his instructor, had read the file 3 times before approving it. The first read produced a coordination record, supply routing, defense scheduling, evacuation triage, that seemed to belong to someone twice Callum's age. The second read was to confirm the dates were not a clerical error. The third read was simply to sit with what the file was telling him, which he did not fully believe until Fleet Records Division confirmed every entry independently, timestamp by timestamp. Callum arrived at the Academy with 1 bag and a length of scorched metal, roughly the size of a forearm, wrapped in cloth. He did not explain it to his bunkmates. He found his quarters, unpacked in 11 minutes, and reported to orientation 4 minutes early. He had not mentioned Station 14. He had not mentioned anything. The strategy seminar met every third day at the long table, and the unofficial hierarchy of the room had settled by the second week, the way hierarchies in rooms like that always settled, around the cadet whose family had commanded fleets before, and who carried that history the way some people carry good posture, without appearing to try. Cadet Ilith Van was 4th year, top of the current class rankings, descended from a line of air and wing commanders whose portraits hung in the Academy's East Corridor. She was not cruel. She had simply never had a framework challenged, and had therefore never needed to develop one that could survive being challenged. It was Van who raised the topic of hopeless engagements, doctrine cases, where a defending force held a position against numbers it could not realistically survive. It was Van who, halfway through the discussion, turned toward the back of the table where Callum sat, and asked the question the way certain cadets ask questions, which is to say with the timing and tone of someone who has prepared it. "Since we're discussing engagements no one could actually win," she said, "I'm curious how many battles our resident frontier specialist has actually been in. Not studied, been in." Several cadets smiled. It was the category of smile that happens in rooms where a hierarchy is being quietly enforced, and everyone present has already decided which side of it they are standing on. Commodore Thal, at the head of the table, said nothing. He had pulled the Station 14 records in the second week of the term. He had been waiting since then for the right moment to let this exact question happen. "That's a reasonable question," Callum said, in the tone of someone who genuinely found it reasonable. He set down his stylus. "Do you want the number of engagements, or the number of days under continuous siege?" The room did not answer immediately, because the room had not expected there to be a difference. "Both then," Van said, recovering. "Give us both." Callum said a number for the engagements. Then he said a second number for the days, and the second number was large enough that two cadets near the far end of the table did the arithmetic out loud, quietly, and stopped when they reached the answer. The smiles stopped, not all at once. The way a wave stops, the ones closest to him first, then spreading outward toward Van, whose expression had not changed but whose posture had, the way a structure shifts before anyone can see the crack that caused it. "I'd like to show the class something," Commodore Thal said, and it was the first thing he had said in 11 minutes. The footage was not dramatic in the way Academy training simulations were dramatic, with their clean geometric threat vectors and orchestral warning tones. It was documentary. Grainy helmet cam and station security footage, time-stamped, unedited, the kind of footage that exists because someone was too busy surviving to think about composition. The first clip showed Station 14's outer ring during what the caption identified as the third assault, 4 years into the siege. Callum, 17 in the footage, was coordinating a staged evacuation of the ring's lower decks, while directing return fire from a position he had clearly chosen because it could not be flanked. He was not shouting. He was reading numbers off a cracked display and giving instructions in the same flat, procedural voice he had just used at the long table. The second clip was 8 months later. A supply convoy, 3 ships, running a corridor that fleet records had marked as a 91% loss probability. All 3 ships arrived. The caption noted that Callum had rerouted the convoy's escort assignments 11 hours before departure, over the objection of the ranking officer present, based on a threat pattern he had identified from 2 prior incidents that no one else on the station had connected. The third clip was shorter and quieter than the first 2. A single corridor camera, fixed angle, showing the station's medical bay during what the caption listed only as Incident 14. See, Callum was not fighting in this one. He was carrying a child down the corridor with one arm while directing 3 other evacuees with the other. His voice on the recovered audio track flat and unhurried, giving directions the way a person gives directions to somewhere they have walked 100 times before. The caption noted that Incident 14C had cost the station nothing, not a structure, not a life. Thal did not comment on why he had included a clip in which nothing was lost. He let it play in full and moved to the next one. By the 4th case study, a boarding action repelled deck by deck over 6 hours, the footage cutting between 4 different helmet cameras. No one in the seminar was speaking. By the 6th, a night defense of the station's reactor core, fought at a numerical disadvantage the footage made no attempt to disguise. Van was not smiling. She was watching with the expression of someone doing a calculation that was going to take considerably longer than the remainder of the class period to finish. The 7th clip ran for 11 seconds. It showed nothing but a status board, the kind mounted above a command station, cycling through casualty projections that had been logged automatically every 6 hours across a stretch of 41 days. The number in the corner never climbed as high as the projections beside it predicted. Nobody in the seminar asked why Thal had included 11 seconds of a status board. By then, the room understood that the gap between the 2 numbers was the entire point. Callum did not speak during any of it. He sat with his hands folded on the table, watching the footage the way the rest of the class was watching it, as though it belonged to someone else's file, and he was simply present for the review. The silence in the room by the 5th clip was the kind that has weight, the kind that makes people conscious of their own breathing. "There are 19 more incidents in the record," Thal said when the footage ended. "I selected these 7 because they were verifiable independently of Callum's own reports." He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Station 14 held for 11 years against a force that Fleet Intelligence estimated should have taken it in 4 months. It fell only when the evacuation was already complete, and it fell because Cadet Callum ordered the final withdrawal himself, rather than remain for a defense that had already served its purpose. A younger cadet near the middle of the table, one who had not spoken during the entire seminar, caught Callum's arm briefly as he stood to leave. 14C, he said, the one where nothing happened. How did you know to move them before the breach reached that corridor? I didn't know, Callum said. I moved them because the corridor was the only one wide enough to carry a stretcher through if I turned out to be wrong. The cadet did not have a response prepared for that, and Callum did not wait for one before continuing to gather his things. Van stopped at the door when the seminar ended. She did not turn around fully. The number you gave, she said. The engagements, it's lower than the number in the footage. I gave you the engagements I commanded directly, Callum said, not the ones I was present for. Van nodded once. The acknowledgement of someone updating a framework rather than defending one, and left without another word. It was not a defeat with a scene attached to it. It was a recalibration, conducted mostly in private, that would continue for some time after she had left the room. Callum gathered his materials. He picked up the length of scorched metal he had brought to every session and never explained. A support strut from Station 14's reactor housing. The last piece of the station's structure recovered before the final withdrawal, and put it back in his bag the way he always did, without ceremony. Cadet Callum, Thal said, before he reached the door. Since your second week here, I have been waiting for the right discussion topic to bring this material into the room. I want you to know that was not for Cadet Van's benefit. Callum looked at him, and did not ask what it had been for. It was so the rest of this class would stop treating command experience as something that only happens inside these walls, Thal said. You already know how to hold a line that shouldn't hold. I can teach you fleet doctrine. I cannot teach you the other thing. You already have it. Callum said nothing. He picked up his bag and walked out toward the next scheduled session, already thinking about the coursework ahead of him rather than the room behind him. Commodore Thal opened the term performance record. Beside Callum's name, in the field reserved for instructor notes, he wrote 3 words. 3 words.